You're listening to the Hire Calling Podcast. I'm Pete Newsome, and this is your source for all things hiring, staffing, and recruiting. I'm back again today with Ricky Baez, not a Friday, but a Wednesday afternoon today. Ricky, how are you midweek?
You know what, Pete? I'm doing great. Ask me why.
Why are you doing so great?
I've had one of those life-changing lunches today. Have you ever had one of those? A life-changing lunch?
Because of the company or because of what you ate?
Because of what I ate.
Then no, definitively no. No lunch I've ever eaten has changed my life, other than maybe for the rest of the afternoon into the evening, but not beyond that.
Oh man, I got to tell you, in the part of town where I live at, there's a lot of sandwich areas, but they're franchises. In my wife, who was working from home, she and I were talking, like, we want to do something different for lunch. So we're like, you know what? There's a meat market right down the street. Let's check this out. It's a meat market from Venezuela. So all right, I go in there and I'm like, all right, I guess I'll take one of your sandwiches, and I'll give those a try.
Wow, you say it as if you did you really walk in as if you were doing them a favor, almost begrudgingly?
Kinda, right? That's how I felt like, because in a world where options are all over, I get kind of frustrated with the options. I just, I find, let me get out of my routine. Let me go check it out. I get the pastrami one. I got in the car, took it home. I took one bite. One of the best pastrami sandwiches I have had in my entire life. Now, I don't know it's because it was really, really good or I was really, really hungry. I don't know yet. But all I know is that I felt way better after that sandwich, and now I'm going to be talking about it all week. So get ready.
Wow. So are you going to plug the place while we're at it, or just leave us hanging?
Yeah, you know what? It's called. It's a really, really basic name. It's called the Meat Emporium in South Orlando. That's literally what it's called. It's a butcher shop / Venezuelan grocery store / Venezuelan sandwich shop.
Who determined it's Venezuelan based on that name? Well, how do you know?
Because when I asked the person what makes this pastrami sandwich any different than any other sandwich, they're like, well, this is from Venezuela. Everything in here is from Venezuela. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, it tasted like it's just a really good pastrami sandwich with some chimichurri sauce. And like, oh, there it is, the chimichurri sauce.
The way you pronounce it, or what it actually is?
Okay, chimichurri, in case people didn't understand. The chimichurri sauce was really good. It's got all the right spices.
And that's Venezuelan.
Oh, yeah. Well, according to what the little guy told me.
Okay.
I mean, his head could barely make it over the counter, man. But man, his customer service skills and his salesmanship was spot on. It was really good.
And the food was great. All right. Well, congrats on a great lunch. That's a good thing. Now you need a nap.
I've never been congratulated for having a great lunch, so thank you, Pete. I really appreciate that.
And I've never heard that a sandwich was a life-changing experience. So I think congratulations are due.
All kinds of firsts in the show. I love it.
All right. Well, we're going to talk today about something that's not a first, unfortunately, and that is when things go south in terms of hiring or specifically when you're recruiting for someone else. In my case, that would be from a third-party staffing perspective when you're recruiting for your client, and then in your case, is from a corporate HR perspective, that would be the internal client. So I think it's an important distinction to make, because when you're internal, you don't have to be quite as sensitive. Now, I say that without having ever been in that role. I've always been the third party who can get fired with a pen stroke, so to speak, right? Yeah. Not even that. Just that's a little too ceremonious. It's just, no, we're not working with you anymore. That's always the risk. But internally, I assume you don't have to be quite as sensitive, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's so internally, yes, you still from an HR point of view in corporate America, you've got your external clients and your internal clients. Obviously, your internal clients are the employees. The customer service still needs to be there, but it's a completely different level of customer service from a staffing perspective, where you have an external client, right? For the external client, you've got to almost pull out the white pair of gloves just to make sure you give that level of service. Whereas you don't necessarily need to bring out those gloves for the internal client. So yes, same rationale, but a different temperature in how you deliver that rationale, if I can put it in different words.
So as the staffing guy, I
Mhm.
like to think, I don't like to think this, but I do think it. I have to confess rather that I think that there's a different sense of urgency when it comes to corporate recruiting. Like you back when you were in that world, you guys get measured in weeks in terms of how long you have to fill a job, right? Sometimes months. I
Yeah.
mean, I've heard these things before where we're measured in days and hours. So it's different, right? It's vastly different.
It is. It is. And and when I first started working for Four Corner Resources back in the day, it was a different experience because things move really really quickly. I give a great example for everybody who don't know what I'm talking about. In corporate America, right? Whenever you make a decision to implement something that's going to affect the entire organization, you can't just whip out a pen and just write it and then it's so. You got to go to legal, you got to go to finance, you got to go to different stakeholders involved. Normally it takes about 3 4 months, right? So then my first project with you, you're like, hey, let's make this happen. And 2 days later you're like, hey, how come this hasn't happened? I'm like, whoa, what? 48 hours later.
I think you
And
mentioned I think you mentioned a committee somewhere in that
yeah, because
conversation.
I'm like, but what about legal? What about this? No, no, we don't do that. We make it happen, and it was a pleasant surprise, Pete. Right? Because it was really good to be in a situation where when things at the top, an order is given, right? Not that you run this place like the Marine Corps or anything like that, but when and a directive is given,
How
it
about a
happens really
decision is
fast.
made? Can we call it that way? Can
That's the
we
best way
describe
to,
it that
yeah.
way?
When a decision is made, there is a lot less hoops to jump through, a lot less obstacles to make it happen, and that was a wake up call for me, which was awesome. I really
So
enjoyed that.
yeah, I think that's indicative of a small business more than anything else, where
Yeah.
you do have that luxury. Because I consider it that after working for two very
Yeah.
large companies for the bulk of my career prior to Four Corner, where it did take an act of Congress, sometimes an act of God, it seemed, to
Yeah.
have any decision made. And one of the things that was important to me from day one in building my own business was to not operate that way, to be
Yeah.
efficient and quick and agile. And but it does take a little getting used to when you have to get over the habits of moving slowly from a big company.
Eh, well, so another thing that I had to learn, right, from a large organization, and by large, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands, like maybe 120,000 employees worldwide, to a smaller outfit is how do you deal with upset clients? How do you deal with upset people? Because it's how I've dealt with it before. Still brought out the human aspect of human resources, but it was more direct in corporate America because those are internal clients, than it would be an external client where maybe if the message is received wrong with an external client, it could cause a contract. Right.
Sure.
And obviously time is money. We're in business to make a profit, and we don't want to do anything that would push a reasonable contract away. But it was really interesting to see how those situations I was involved with, how I had to quickly change my rationale and how I approach those delicate
No,
conversations.
and
It was really
so now my story of when you were new to us was your I I want to phrase this the right way, that would have been quick to go and correct the client, right? Like you could do internally when it's not as sensitive. We'll just describe it that way. I think that's fair.
yeah.
Where we always have to be sensitive to how even when we're right and they're wrong and we know
Mhm.
it, we still can't be quite as aggressive in sharing that as we would if we were dealing with people internally, right? It's just a different it's the nature of the relationship. But I remember early on when you wanted to address some of those things heads on, and we're like, well, we need to be a little
I remember,
sensitive.
I remember that. Yeah, it's because Well, Pete, you know this. I'm really big of attacking things head on, especially when it's, there's friction involved. And I love healthy conflict because if healthy conflict is managed properly, you're always going to come out. Both of you are always going to come out in a better situation, as if that conflict didn't happen to begin with. Because if it's done properly, you make that relationship stronger. And I remember in that one instance, I'm like, it's I had to slow down. I had to take that's weird. That's the one thing that I was quick at, right? And I had to slow it down to make sure that I'm doing everything right. And another thing that people need to consider in these situations, especially with an external client, you know what? Better yet, Pete, let me ask you this. 20, 30 years ago, the notion of the customer is always right, always
Yep.
rung true. Is that the same now?
I don't know that that was ever true. Um,
Ooh, okay.
it's sort of a silly phrase if you think about it, right? The
Okay.
customer's always right. What does that mean? Well, it means you can side with the customer always, even when they're wrong. I think that's probably what it means to some
Yeah.
degree. Um, it's something I heard years ago from someone I used to report to a long, long time ago, but it stuck with me. Is a saying that he would say, "Where you sit determines where you stand," and I
Mm,
think it's another way of saying things are often a matter of perspective. And so the individual who's wrong in any instance doesn't think they're wrong more often than not,
mm,
right? It's
okay.
like the bad guy in the movie. I always go, do they know they're the bad guy, or do they think like Thanos didn't think he was the bad guy, right?
Ooh, great example.
Um,
Great example. That's
yeah,
right.
we
He thought he was doing good in the world. Yeah.
yeah, he thought he was doing the right thing, and yeah, population control. So that, but you know,
That's a
but in the instance where in business someone's um, wrong, you have a decision to make as when they're your client. How are you going to handle it? Who's going to budge? And depending on the situation, whether it was you know, decades ago or currently, I've always looked at it and said, well, every situation's unique and has to be dealt with
mhm.
that way. So have I conceded things? Absolutely, without hesitation. Um, but like you said, you want some good to come out of it. If I have to look at a situation and there's a long list of them, of problems that I could go through. Um, and each one is unique, and I could say, well, it's not our fault, but it's no one's fault. So we're going to take ownership of it. We're
Yeah.
going to fix it. We're going to make it go away. Sometimes it's, hey, let's split this, right? If it's financial in nature. Now, I've been fortunate throughout my sales career and through the time at Four Corner. The vast majority of the time, we've worked with wonderful individuals who are rational and logical and caring and kind and value the relationship that we have with them. I mean, that's how our business is built, as you well know. If we don't think there's an opportunity to build a true relationship, it's not business we typically pursue.
Yeah.
And so that means we're not for everyone and everyone's not for us, and that's okay. So because of that, I think we typically can resolve things. But yeah, there's been a few occasions where there's an impasse and we've not been
Mhm.
willing to concede, depending on what the situation is. As often as not, I think it's how each side approaches it, right? I mean, if you go in guns blazing, the outcome is probably not going to be favorable, or at least you're setting yourself up for a challenge. But I'll tell you that I've always said when I was selling and developing new relationships, when I was on the front end of that, I would tell prospective clients as they were becoming clients, hopefully, that what we can't avoid problems, and that if we work together long enough, I guarantee there will be problems.
Yep.
And don't judge us by whether we can avoid them. Judge us by how we react in the moment, how we
Ooh.
work together to solve them. And it's something that I feel has been a differentiator for us over the years, or at least for me in the way I've approached client relationships. And I also run at the problems instead of away from them, but I would do so in a little more controlled fashion than as if I was dealing with someone internally.
Pete, what you just said, it's really strong, right? That piece of that you don't hold on. Say it again. Say it again because you got me with it. When you're
So
talking about the problem. Go ahead.
yeah,
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
it was one of the lines that I would. So when you're in staffing, we all have the same product, which is
Mhm.
potentially every candidate out there. Pricing's kind of the same. We all use same tools, and the differentiators really come down to the individual way you operate at an organization level, but also at an individual level. And companies have a decision to make is who they're going to work with, and it comes down to, again, not price or the product that you have. It's who do you like, who do you trust, who
Yep.
can you rely on, who are you used to working with, as often as not. But so knowing that I had to be the difference in those situations, I would say, look, I'm not going to tell you that we're going to avoid problems or that working with us means things are going to be problem free. Quite the opposite. I will guarantee you we will have problems if we work together long enough. But I hope you don't judge us by whether we can avoid those. I judge us by how we deal with them when they arise. And that is the way I've always tried to operate. And I think it works pretty well.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a strong statement, right? Because, for somebody to come out and say to a client that look, we don't have any issues. We've done this so many times. It'll be like hop and a skip in the park. And you set that bar so high, then something tiny happens when you've already built this bar that there's just perfection. Yes, you're going to create an issue. So as a leader, you do have to manage that expectation. I like going into that relationship with the expectation that, look, problems are inevitable. It's going to happen, right? So don't judge us by that, but how we react to it, how we get over that hump, how we are going to be better as a team as we work together to overcome that obstacle, judge us by that. And if everybody adopted that mentality, I think we're going to have a lot more successful businesses out there. Because I think too many times we try to sell too much above and
Sure.
beyond problems. We try to sell too much, sell things that people don't need. And I said it on the last show, and you said this in the last end of month meeting, that we shouldn't be selling anything to anybody. They should be the opposite. They should be coming to us, asking us why should they be a part of this environment, because this environment is an environment you do want to be in.
Yeah,
Right.
we're not
So
we're not
it's
in
a
the square
different
peg
shift.
round hole business, right? I mean
Right.
that's what we should avoid at all cost. And I think because I have thought about this a lot over the years, and when you see new recruiters or new salespeople, there is a tendency to oversell. There's a tendency to
Yeah.
convince, and good salespeople can be very convincing. They can be manipulative, but that's a temporary thing. That doesn't stand the test of time. That
Yeah.
doesn't last. So I'm sure at times in my prime as a salesperson, I've been good enough to talk people into doing things in the moment. But I've tried to avoid that because I'd rather be genuine, because I've always thought my reputation matters more than anything else, right? You
Yep.
can't
Yep.
put that genie back in the bottle if it goes south. And so I've always made sure that from day one with Four Corner that our reputation had to be protected. And so naturally, I think that means being vulnerable and honest and genuine in your conversations, which you should go, well, of course you're going to be that, right? But we're not really taught that growing up. We're taught to, I mean, look on social media, right? This is an easy example. Few are the people who show their worst stuff, right? I mean, I used to kind of have fun over the years when the kids were younger. I would show the picture that like was the real picture, of everyone looking in the wrong direction, and my boys punching each other, or someone crying in the picture, because that's real. That was what was happening more often than not four kids smiling, looking at, straight forward with their hands in their laps, right? That wasn't going to happen. But that's not what we do. We want to show our best. We want to show how great things are. It's an ego stroke. But that's not real. That's not genuine. So when it comes to business, man, we are way off on a weird topic.
No, we're not. We're not. Actually, this is perfect. This is perfect. And I'll show you why, right? Because at first I'm thinking we're not. Here's why, Pete. Because you can start off any business relationship that way, right? Let's be genuine. I'm gonna help. We are gonna have problems. Let's get over those problems. So you're setting that bar pretty high. That automatically, the right clients are gonna stay. The right people are gonna stay in that relationship. But even then, if you sign up to be with that client, we're going down 2-3 months down the road with that expectation that we are gonna have problems. You still are going to have a small percentage of those folks that you're going to work with that are going to get really upset at you for whatever reason, right? And then you as a leader, now that you set that bar up so high, as a leader, you got to mitigate those conversations. You got to figure out, let's take a step back, because the first mistake people make, Pete, the first mistake people make when somebody's yelling at them, especially a client, is they take it personal. As soon as you take it personal, you're losing that battle. You lose, because if you take it personal, you're going to react from a personal nature. And then now, it's, as a human being, it's important to understand that yes, we would take it personal. You just can't react of it, right? So don't deny that human emotion, right? Accept it, acknowledge it, process it, but you got to take that step back and think about, why is this person upset? Number one. Number two, it's let's shift the conversation from personal attacks to actually fixing the problem, even if it costs you a little bit of money in that little small battle. Because if you take a step back, if you play your cards right, if you lose a little bit of money in that small battle, you might win the war later on. But that's when you're going to put your strategic cap on, to make sure your emotions don't get in the way. Have you ever had a situation like that?
Yeah, it's I see it with our younger staff, where emotions, and I'm old at this point, so younger has not just been in the past couple of years, I guess, for a while now, where maybe it's maturity, maybe it's just time and experience, where when you see those emotions come out, you're like, ooh, that you are going to lose.
Yeah.
That is because you're irrational when you're emotional. And as we know, that anyone who's in a relationship, I'll just say, to tell someone to stop being emotional is the last thing you want to say if you actually want them to stop being emotional, right?
So I'll tell you this, folks, anybody out there listening right now, if you take anything from this show, I'll guarantee you this: if you tell somebody to stop being emotional, that is the best way to get a physical injury. It's the best way. Do not do that, especially to your partner at home.
Isn't that weird? I mean, it's a human nature thing, but no one likes to be told, calm down. No one likes to be told, stop being emotional, stop raising your voice, whatever it might be, right? No one wants to be told that, but you have to. The ability to maintain your emotions in a negotiation, in a struggle, in a challenge of any kind. I mean, whether you're watching, or listening to, Joe Rogan and interview MMA fighters, right? They talk about the ability to maintain control, and that's it's the same principle when you're in a negotiation or there's a problem at work. And maybe that's part of my mentality too, where I've always known that things will go wrong. Right? Yep. Like, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you just have to be prepared for it. And it's like, I'm going to go from one battle to the next, and each day has its own challenges. So I don't know if that's helpful advice to anyone, but it's certainly advice that I take very, very strongly.
It is helpful. And Pete, you know what? Let me can I give you a quick example of a situation I was in? Now, this is from corporate America, corporate HR, dealing with somebody who's just had an issue in communicating. About 6-7 years ago, I was an HR manager, and I was overseeing the recruitment process, right? One of the things that I do, the finalists for a team manager position, I like to give them a call, kind of let them know why they didn't get the position, and ask them if they want feedback. We've talked about that on the show. And this guy said, yeah, I would like some feedback. And I told him on why he didn't get that position. He went off on me. I mean, calling me all kinds of names, and you blanky this and blanking that and blank, 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 blank. And, I started thinking now it's Ricky 20 years prior would have handled that conversation very differently than how he handled it or me handle it right then and there. But I started thinking about his goal, his rationale, right? Obviously he wasn't thinking rationally, right? Because he's yelling and cussing out the guy who probably has the power to overturn this if that's something he wanted to do, right? But he's there cussing me out, yelling at me that I made the biggest mistake of my career of not hiring that person, dropping F bombs left and right. So I didn't interrupt Pete. I didn't interrupt. And I let him go. And just I let him talk and then I stopped. And then once he stopped, I'm like, all right, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah. What do you want me to do right now? I mean, seriously, let's be real. Let's clock out real quick. You've cussed me out. You call me names, right? Telling me I made the biggest mistake of my career. From your perspective, what do you think is going to happen now? Do you think I'm going to say at this point, man, you're right? God, I'm an idiot. You're 100% right. I made the biggest mistake. Let me bring you on board after you just completely threw me under the bus. And that's when I realized, I'm like, okay, he's responding emotionally, right? I cannot respond emotionally. I just got to make sure and give him the information he needs. Obviously, I'm not going to hire him because, in a situation like that, I'm supposed to feel bad that I didn't pick him. He did the opposite. He confirmed it. I'm like, boy, I dodged that bullet.
Exactly.
Right. So let's say that was an internal person. Let's say that was a hiring authority that I'm working with, and he's yelling at me that way. Obviously, I'm going to handle that conversation a little bit more forcefully because I'm not going to let anybody disrespect myself or my team. So we're going to have a different conversation, especially, and maybe, I don't know if you thought about talking about this right now, especially when somebody's disrespecting your team members. Pete, everybody out there listening, if somebody is yelling at your team members, disrespecting them, it is crucial that you step in to help them out. It is crucial that your employees see that you have their back, right? From a disrespect perspective. Because if the internal client or the client is being disrespectful because something wasn't done, then you can understand why the person is upset. But you got to separate those two things. One is the performance issue and one is a respect issue. And the person who's dealing with that needs to be savvy enough to separate those two emotional situations and address them separately. But your employees need to know that you have their back.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's a lot of good points in that. But when you do have to separate it, right? And that's a perfect time for someone who's senior to step in when someone is berating an employee. There's never a time for that. Right? It's never okay. And I think it is different when it's internal versus external, because just as someone can, wave their hand and make the third-party staffing company go away, it works both ways. And we've done that. We've cut relationships because of the way they, someone communicated with us, the lack of respect. It's one thing for someone to be upset, but there's a point, right? There's a line. Yeah. And when that line's crossed, that's just never okay. And, I can recall almost all of those scenarios because I think it's because they're rare when they happen. And I've never regretted firing a client. I'll tell you that. We've been on the other side of that. I mean, there's one situation in particular. I won't name the name. I'm really tempted to. Don't do it. It was a large organization, large timeshare organization, and it was an executive. That's as far as I'm going to go. There's a bunch of them. But it was an executive who wasn't even local, and he was upset with something one of our contract employees had done. Mm-hmm. And he didn't understand the nature of the relationship between us and the contractor. And he called me, and when he was upset, and he was cussing like a sailor, and he was saying things like, this is a person you trained. And then I'm like, no, we didn't train them. We recruited them based on their skill set. And he was like, when you trained them and you managed them to do, I'm like, no, again, we don't manage them. That's not the nature of the relationship. And after about 5 minutes of it, I was like, all right, dude, here's, it was the first time I had ever done that, where I said, we're not going to work with you anymore. I think that's pretty clear at this point. But your homework is to go and figure out how things actually work within your organization, because you're the most clueless individual I've ever encountered. And I got to say, I can count on one hand the number of times I've said something similar in my very long career of selling. And each time, two things are true. One, it's felt really good in the moment. I mean, it's felt great, because as the person who's never been in the position, actually I am now, that now I am the customer in many cases. So, but I don't treat people that way. But after being the one to take it throughout the bulk of my career, and then those few times where I actually gave it back, felt amazing. But then it was almost immediately followed by regret. Because I don't like burning bridges. And even when it was necessary, even when it was justified, I said it was necessary. It's not necessary. You should be better than that. You should avoid it. And so there were a couple of organizations where we weren't going to be able to work with them until that individual left because of those interactions, which I regret. But in the moment, so I have to say, I don't know that that was me losing my emotion as much as me just, just wanting to give it back, when it was very much deserved. I don't know. Maybe that's one and the same.
A little bit of retaliation then, right? A little bit of a little taste of your own medicine. I've had my consultancy company for about 10 years. Most of it has been part-time up until recently. And in that time, I remember 3 clients in 10 years that I fired. And I don't regret not 1 second of it, because they've crossed the line. I mean, they really crossed the line. And to me, crossing the line is when you get personal, right? Start having personal attacks with the people I've been working with. And to me, if you are so upset at a situation that you cannot possibly convey the words together to articulate to me exactly what went wrong, and you're resulting into personal attacks, I don't know if that's somebody I want to work with.
Right.
I don't care how successful you are. I don't care to continue that relationship if you're not going to be able to separate the person from the actual act.
Right.
And I just rather not do that. So I've never so I get what you're saying though, but I'm trying to put myself in your position, right? Because at some point we have to gauge ourselves, like, how thick is my skin, right? Can I take this? Can I not take this? And I'm sure that goes through your mind, because it's gone through my mind. But I had to make a decision, right? It's not about how thick my skin is. It's from my perspective, it's what I'm willing to let go and what I'm willing to tolerate. I hate to use the tolerate word, right? Because it sounds like you have to do something, but it's what you're willing to do from that point. And this is what I want everybody to hear today, Pete. When you're in a situation, especially at work, when you're in a situation where somebody just hits that nerve on you, right? Just hits that nerve, the worst thing you can do is react emotionally. That's the worst thing you can do, right? And that is the hardest thing to do, right? To not react emotionally, right? So the best advice I can give people, if you're finding yourself in that situation that you're just being berated, do what you need to do to get out of that situation, but try not to get emotional with it. Go take a break, go somewhere else, take a breather, and then come back when your rational thought is in play. And
that's it's great advice. It's easier said than done.
It is,
because you're in the moment. Your tendency is to react. Maybe being in staffing, just like in HR, you know that the next issue is around the corner, and when your product, people are a product, so there's 3 parties involved. When we're involved as a third party staffing company, so everyone's has their own perspective on whatever that scenario is, and stories are from that perspective. And I think if you said something a few minutes ago, which really rings true. In a different scenario, you ask the person what they think you should have done, right? Or what you should do in that moment. And that's a way that I've handled it often when a client is upset in a situation. And usually that just when someone's upset, it's because their life is more difficult as a result of whatever happened. It's not even
Yeah.
that they're upset
Heard.
with any one group or individual. They're upset at the situation. And it's a question that I've always asked is to say, well, what do you want the outcome to be? Right.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think, what do you think we could have done differently? I mean, that's one that I've often asked in a scenario where when I knew that there was nothing we could have done differently, I want to pose that question. You're upset with us. You're, implying that our business relationship could end. Right. I understand that it's a bad, something bad happened. How could we have handled it differently? And that is almost always changed the course of the conversation.
Yes.
Because when you have to stop and actually think, well, if you think we did something wrong, tell me what it was, right? Because I'm not following. And but you can only do those things if you anticipate the problem and you, like we keep saying, you don't act, you're not out of your mind. You're in control when this situation arises.
And sometimes situations get so out of control, you have no choice but just sit back and just let the person talk and yell. Just let them talk and yell. Another situation that another experience of mine that comes to mind in that call center that I was telling you about. I mean, I can tell you what it was Sears Home Improvement, right? It's now it's called Transformco, and everybody knows Sears, right? And so there was a call center in Lake Mary, which is about 10 minutes north of downtown Orlando, of about 900 people in there. And this lady came to the call center, just a customer, just yelling at everybody. I mean, Pete, I could not believe how upset this lady was. I mean, really upset, yelling at the security guard, yelling at my employee up front. And my employer calls me, Ricky, you got to get down over here. We have a customer who's really upset. I'm like, oh my God, let me go, get my HR hat on. And I go there. And by the time she's done cussing everybody out. By the time she's done yelling, I'm finally figure out, hey, man, how I'm here. I'm Ricky Bias, HR man. How can I be of assistance? Want some water? Want some candy? Something to calm her down, right? And I'm like, look, I don't know what the issue is. Help me help you. Pete, the issue is that she placed an order for a family portrait. She got her family here ready to take those pictures. And the address they gave her, or she looked it up, it was the address to the call center, right? Not the Sears store that's 5 miles down the road, right? Now, she's there with her beautiful outfit. Her kids are in the car. They got their beautiful outfits on, and she is just yelling. The kids are crying. And I'm like, ma'am, it's literally 5 miles down the road. I'll give you the address, give me your cell phone number. I'll text it to you. I'll even call them to say, hey, so-and-so is coming by. No, she was so upset that we didn't have a studio at the home improvement call center that she Googled by mistake and spent her whole time finding this place, right? So I can't help other than me getting her in my car so I could take her. I don't know what else I can help her with, right?
You should have pulled out your phone and just started snapping pictures.
I should have. You know what? If I didn't care about my career, my job, you're right. That's exactly what I should have done. But I'm like, no, like my job there was not to add more jet fuel to this fire because she was upset to the point the security guard from the next building came over. It is 90 years old talking about, you need help. I'm good, Mike. Thank you. Really appreciate it, Mike. I'm good. I got this. No, but some situations don't need a response. Some situations are so out there that any response you give can probably make it worse. The best thing to do, if it doesn't get physical, is just sit there, take it, and if there's nothing you can do, just let them go about your way. Let them go about their way, because for you to engage just because you think you need to engage, sometimes it'll make the situation worse.
Well, man,
can you imagine if I kept arguing with her?
No, but I think we can't top that story today.
No. Oh, we could be here for hours because I have a bunch there, Pete.
We could. Well, look, we're going to talk more about candidates later and dealing with them. But I think the main thing is when you're working with people, especially in recruiting, You know there's going to be problems. Anticipate them. And when they arise, maintain control. Keep your cool. Take a moment when you need to. Look at the situation from the other's perspective, and then try to figure out what the desired outcome is, because your problem's already there, right? To continue to beat the horse isn't going to be helpful. What is helpful is to try to get to an outcome that everyone can live with, and then move on. All right, move on if appropriate, if you can.
Yeah.
Not sometimes you can't, but that's the goal.
Let me add one more to that. One more little piece of advice. And if you're in that situation where the conversation is getting hot and heavy, and you feel that you can't control and you're about to lose your cool, remove yourself, excuse yourself, go get a cup of water, get help. Get a manager, get somebody to help you out with that. You do not have to deal with that situation by yourself. Go get some help if you feel you're not going to be able to make it there from the emotional perspective. Now, here's a good thing for leaders to train your teams. If you are a leader, when you have a team, practice out those scenarios. If you have a team member that's about to get into a conversation that's about to get hot and heavy, make sure you let your manager know ahead of time, just in case they need some help. You hit that quote unquote button so they can come in and help you out. A well thought out plan will really save you in the long run, especially because you want to maintain your rational thought process and not use your emotional head in that situation. So
great advice. Perfect ending. And if all else fails, call Ricky.
Yeah, give me a call. That's right. Give me a call. I'll tell you about a great sandwich shop right down the street.
His life changed today. He will take your call.
It did. Oh man, my life changed today. Oh, Pete, I know we're at the end of the show and I'm on a roll. I'm okay. I know. We'll do it the next time. We're good. We're
gonna end with a cliffhanger.
No. I was just gonna say you mentioned something about being old earlier, and it reminded me. Do you watch the Golden Girls at all?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know that I watch with any regularity, but yes, I mean, I watched the Golden Girls, but no, I didn't. I don't know how old I was when it came out. I may have been in college when that was out.
It was in the 80s.
Oh, it was?
I love
Okay.
That show. I love that show. The other night I'm on Hulu and watch. Oh, let me watch the Golden Girls. Anyway, there was this one episode, right? And you remind me of this when you said that you feel like
I remind you of the Golden Girls. Cool.
No. Oh my God. Let's have this situation, right? Where there was a guy on the show, and one of the characters, Blanche, said, "Look, you're 45 years old," and the guy looked old, and I paused it, and I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute." I'm 45. I don't look nothing like that. I felt this big, Pete. I felt this big. I felt old. Sorry.
Well, have you ever seen, there was a meme or something going around a few years ago. It was showing the age of actors that seemed and looked really, really old, yes. In the old days, right? Whatever the old days were. And they were like, he's 40, just like you're saying. You're like, he looks 70 in the picture.
Are you kidding me? It threw me for a loop. I couldn't sleep that night.
No, I didn't. I was not a regular viewer, but I did pull it up when Betty White died to show I think my youngest, my 14-year-old, and we watched. I think what was the first episode. This was it was recent. It was in the past few months.
Yeah.
And my two thoughts were: one, it was really funny, and two, it was way inappropriate by today's standards.
Oh my God,
I mean, yes. They're filthy, and it is the anti-woke show. It would not fly today.
Out of all shows, right? Out of all shows. Oh, it's a great show. I know they're not paying for the sponsorship. Man, Hulu, Golden Girls, they're right there. I know. I was in the Marine Corps. I get it. I love that show. Whatever. I'm owning it.
There you go. Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you for listening today. Ricky, thank you as always. And we love feedback. So please, subscribe if you're so inclined. We would love that too. And otherwise, drive safe. And we look forward to next time.
Absolutely. Let us know what you think about the show. Give us a like. Let us know. Give us some feedback on your favorite platform. Have a good one. Good night.
Good night.